Okay, welcome back. We are in part 3 of lesson 10, and we had just finished up with step 15, and we're moving on to 16. Before we move on to 16, I want to show you what I have so far just to kind of review where we're at. So first thing up here on line 1, I've set up a variable called rand button ID. Then I'm calling a function called setBoard, which is down here, and we'll go over that in a second. And then I call that function. Then I've got 4 event handlers or on-event blocks for each button. So for button 1, button 2, button 3, and button 4, they each have their own event handler, and each one of those calls a function called checkCorrect, which we'll look at that in a second. And then each one of those function calls will send a parameter here that says that we've pushed button 1 or we've pushed button 2 or whatever it is. So then we've got a little bit of delay going here. Come on, there we go. Yep. Okay. And this is my function checkCorrect. So this is what happens when we push the button. So for example, if I push button 4, then this event handler here is activated, and it calls this function checkCorrect, and it passes this string button 4, and then it categorizes that as button ID. So it gets that button ID, and then it prints to the console log, and it says it's checking button ID, which if we pushed button 4, that would be button 4. That's what it would be, button 4. So it would print button 4 down here, and then it compares the button ID, or in this case button 4, with the random button ID, which is the ID that we used to pick the random color, or the button that gets the random color or the different color. And then it prints to the console that says you got it right if it matches, or it says wrong if it doesn't match. Now my other function I have here so far is setBoard, and this one I've talked about a couple times already. So real quick, I just have some variables that set the color to a random number, and it takes one of those and sets it to a different color that has a random number that is plus 20 from the original random number. So that's all there is to that. So the next thing we're going to move into is how to switch player turns, and this gets a little tricky. And what you have here again is some text between Alexis and Michael saying this is what they want to do. And basically what it boils down to is you have the player 1 button and the player 2 button, and we can make one of them turn gray, or we can make both of them turn gray to indicate whose turn it is. So when it's player 1's turn, then the player 1 box will turn gray, and then when it's player 2's turn, that box will turn gray. So that's how we tell whose turn it is. So this would be like an app where you would pass the phone back and forth between 2 people, and they would pick the color that they think it is. So then they talk about a little bit how that would work, and they're talking about a function called switch player, and setting up a variable called current player, which we're going to do. So let's go ahead and move on to that in the next part, and that should take us to part 17. So it says next step, alternating turns, and this is going to require 3 parts. And then it says notice there's a pattern to what we're doing. So first thing, and it's the same thing we did the last time, we're adding a global variable, we're adding a new function definition that updates that variable, and then we're adding a call to the new function that we just made. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So it says add a global variable called current player and make that equal to 1 to the top of the program, because remember the global variable is outside of the functions. If it's inside the function, then it's a local variable, and it won't be seen by anything outside the function. So we're going to go back to our variables here. We're going to get a variable x equals blank because we want to set it to 1, it says. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in there, and I'm going to call it current player with capital P using my camel case. I'm going to set it to 1. And that's going to be our default setting, and the program as it goes along will change it from 1 to 2 and back again. So we have player 1, player 2, player 1, player 2. So we want to add a new function to the code for switch player, and we're going to call it switch player, and this is kind of how it should look. So what we're going to do is go back to our functions here, and I'm going to put it just below our event handlers. It really doesn't matter where it goes, but since that's the way, no, actually I'll put it at the bottom. Since I already have check correct, I got set board, I'll just put it at the bottom. So I'm not passing any variables, at least it doesn't look like I am at this point, so I'm going to use the one that doesn't have the empty space there, just the define a function, and I'm going to drag that down here on the bottom, and I'm going to call it switch player. Switch player. Now what I could do if I wanted to at this point is I could take this code here and I could probably just switch to show text and copy that in there, but I'm going to go ahead and just drag the blocks in because I think it's easier for you to see the blocks than it is to see the text when I upload this and the resolution of the video and everything. So what it's telling me to do is I want to use an if statement, so that's under control, and it looks like it's an if else. So I'm going to take an if else block, I'm going to put that in my function, and I have that variable called current player, and it's asking me to compare something, so I'm going to use that equality operator, and I'm going to drag it and put it in the block. So it's saying if current player is equal to 1. So I'm going to type that in there. Current player is equal to 1. Then change current player to 2. So how I'm going to do that is with variable, and I'm going to go up in here, and I don't want the var one because remember that declares the variable. I just want to change the variable or assign it. So I'm going to take the assign a variable, I'm going to put it right here, and then I'm going to say, this says I should say current player is equal to 2. So I'm going to say current player is equal to 2. So what this is basically doing is in order to switch the player, it's checking to see who is the player right now. So if 1 is the player right now, it's going to current player would equal 1, and it will switch it to 2, and it'll make current player equal to 2. So the opposite of that would be that if it wasn't equal to 1, if it was equal to 2, then I would want to make it equal to 1. So the way we're going to do that, instead of adding another one of these, what it does here is it just adds the else statement. So I'm going to take another one of those assign a variable blocks, and then I'm going to put in current player, and then it's going to be equal to 1. So what this little block here is saying is it's going to check to see what number the current player is. If it's equal to 1, it's going to change it to 2. If it's not equal to 1, which means it has to be equal to 2, it's going to change it to 1. So this one just causes it to flip back and forth. So it goes from 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to, or 1 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 1, back and forth like that. So that's that function called switch player, and I think that should be pretty easy. Oh no, what I want to do, actually what I want to do here first is I want to put that console log just to test it, because it wants me to stick that in there to test it out. So what I've got here is I've got this else, and then the else ends, and then it tells me to put the console log. So that's going to go outside the if statement. So outside the if statement, then I'm going to say I'm going to need a plus sign because I'm going to be adding a string to a variable, and I'm going to say, ooh, wait a second, that's not what I wanted to happen. It dropped in the wrong spot. I want it to go, ooh, and now I got a big mess here. Okay, hold on. There, that's where I want it to go. And then this one is correct. Yeah, 1. So in here, what I want it to say is current player is. So I can follow along in the console log. And I'm going to leave a space there after the quote, because if I don't, it's going to bump the number right up against it. And then the current player, I want to type the current player variable, because that's what's going to change. So current player is the current player variable, and that's not in quotes because that's a variable. Okay, so right now this is saying switch player is not showing up anywhere, so I have to figure out where I need to put it. So it says add a call to switch player as the last line inside the check correct function. So if I go back up to the check correct function, which is right here, it says at the last line is where I've got set board. I'm going to do another one of those, another function call right here, and this time I'm going to call that the, what do we call it, switch player function. So switch player using camel case. You have to make sure that your cases and your spelling and everything matches exactly. If it doesn't match, then it will not work. So if I did a lowercase p on this one and an uppercase p on another one, it wouldn't work at all, and I would get that little error saying that there's some problem or whatever. So there it is, switch player. So that's going to refer down to this function here, the switch player function, and it should work. And what it will do, if we test it now, it's going to print it out down here in the console. So I'm going to drag that up so you can see it, and I'm going to run it to test it. So right now it's telling me, because all my other console logs are still working, it's telling me the correct button is button 1, which is this one, and I can see that looks a little lighter than the others, so I'll click on it. And now it says it did all the stuff I did last time, plus it says current player is 2. So when I click this again, it should say, yep, current player is 1. And I click it again, it goes back to 2. I click it again, it goes back to 1. Now let's see if I get one wrong. So I got the wrong one. So it did say wrong, and it went back to player 2. So it's alternating players. It's going back and forth between player 1 and player 2, and it's still telling me that whether I picked the right or wrong one. Okay, so that's that. It looks like that works. I've tested it out. Now the next thing that I want to do is go on to the next one, is next how the switch turns, and I'll go ahead and click finish and continue. And then it's going to take me to 18, and we're almost to the end. Okay, so update the UI to indicate whose turn it is. So the UI is the user interface, and what I need to do is figure out whose turn it is based on which one of these has that gray color over it. So if you remember at the beginning, they said whoever's turn it is would be that gray color. So now I'm in the user interface. That's up here in the design. So before, like if I click here on the code, that takes us back to our code, but it defaulted to design to show us here. And what it says is the choice has been made for you in the design of the app to indicate whose turn it is. Notice in the design there are two gray rectangles behind the player scores with IDs player 1 highlight and player 2 highlight, and then player 2 highlight starts out hidden. So what I'm doing is, and if you look at this, you can kind of see on the properties, if I kind of mouse over here, I guess this is telling me this is player ID highlight. I click on it, and over here in the properties, it's called player 1 highlight. It has all these different things in there, and it doesn't. This one doesn't start out hidden, I don't think. Let me see if we can get that one. May start out hidden, so I probably can't see it. Nope, there it is. Yeah, it says player 2 highlight. Player 2 highlight, and it's that checkbox means it starts out hidden. So that's what it's telling me. So now what it says I'm supposed to do. So that's already done. So what I need to do is add code to the if statement in the switch player. So in that one we just did where we switch player, that uses the hide element and show element. So we can hide that gray box, and then we can show the gray box. So it goes back and forth. So I'm going to go back to my code up here where it says code. I'm going to find that if statement in switch player, and remember that was a function called switch player, and there's my if statement right here. So what it wants me to do is let me see here what it wants me to do. Oop, I'm already there. Okay, is put in this this hide and show element. So in this case here, I'm going to need, well, in both I'm going to need 2 hides and 2 shows, and one of them is going to be when it's player 1's turn, or one set, and one set's going to be when it's player 2's turn. So over here I'm looking for hide and show element in the UI controls or user interface, and there they are right there, hide and show. So I'm going to grab a show, I'm going to put it right under here, right under current player, and then I'm going to grab a hide, and I'm going to put it under current player. And I'm going to do the same thing inside the else take a show, and I'm going to take a hide and drag it over there, drop it in there. So now what it's doing is, in addition to changing this number back and forth between 1 and 2, now what I'm doing is I am changing the shading and changing it back and forth. So in the case of when I'm changing it to player 2, what I want to do is I want to show player 2's highlight and hide player 1's highlight. So under show element here, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to find player 2 highlight. So if I scroll, there it is right there, player 2 highlight, and I'm hiding player 1's highlight. So I'm going to find player 1's highlight. There it is right there. And then down here on the other side, the show and hide, it's the reverse of that. So when it's player 1's turn, I want to show player 1's highlight, and then I want to hide player 2's highlight. So now we can see what's happening here is when this switch player function is called, it's going to say, okay, what's the current player variable set at right now? And if it says, okay, right now it's set at 1, then it says, okay, change it to 2, show the player 2 highlight, and then hide the player 1 highlight. Now if I run that again, it says, okay, what's the current player, who's the current player right now? And if it says it's 2, so that's not equal to 1, so it jumps down to the else block, and then it says, okay, if it's 2, then change current player to 1, and then show player 1's highlight and hide player 2's highlight. So it just flips those back and forth. So we've done that. Let's see, we've done that, for example, player 1's turn. So that explains everything that I just said. And then it says on the tip here, make player 2 highlight start out hidden by checking the hidden box in the design mode. I showed that to you. If you go to design mode, we come over here to player 2 highlight, click on that. There it shows it's hidden when it starts out. If we go to player 1's highlight, you can see right here where this should be that's player 1 highlight. That button is not clicked, so it does not start out hidden. But we want player 2's to start out hidden because player 1 goes first. Okay, so back to the code. Let's take a look at it and see if it works. And we're going to hit run. And now I'm looking at these. It looks to me like this is the lighter of the 4. I click on it, and so it looked like it worked. See how that flipped to gray? Now, so it's player 2's turn. Now I think that's the right one. And now this one flipped to gray, and now it's player 1's turn. I click on that. Now it's player 2's turn. Player 2 clicks on that. Now it's player 1's turn. And we just keep going back and forth like that, picking the lighter number, or the lighter square. So so that looks like a ton of stuff. It looks like we've done a lot. And we're almost done. We just have to figure out how to set up a score. But really, you know, when you think about it, it's not a lot. It's all stuff that we've done before, except for the functions. I don't think we've gotten into functions yet. But everything here, we've pretty much done all this before. So when you think about it, like when we add all these pieces together, it's not as hard as it looks, I think. Okay, so I'm going to click finish and go on to continue. And now I'm on 19, and here we are with Alexis and Michael having their conversation, and now they're talking about the score. So we want to keep track of the score. They're saying, well, we should add a couple more global variables. So those are at the top, outside of all the functions. And then it's going to, talks about how we're going to do this and all that other stuff here. And you can see we're using looks like we're using some AND blocks and stuff like that we've already talked about. So let's go ahead and go on to continue and see what the next piece looks like. All right, so on the next part, it's saying that we have to add this function called update score by. So we're going to follow the same pattern that we used before, where we add a global variable, a function, a call to the function, and then we'll console log it so we can make sure that it's working. So first step, it says add the global variables. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to grab a couple of variables, and on these particular variables I am Also using the variable x equals blank, because I want to set those to 0 at first. You can see right up here it tells you variable p1 score equals 0, so you should know you're declaring the variable and you're setting it at the same time. So I want to do 2 of them, and I want to take the first one. It says it's going to be called p1 score, and I'm going to use a capital S like they did there, just so I don't get confused later. I'm going to set it to 0. Now I'm going to go to P2 score, and that's player 2 score. I'm going to set it to 0, so when we start out the game, everybody has 0. And then I want to add a new function called update score by. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom. There's my switch player function. I'm going to go grab another function block. And on this one, I think, yeah, we're going to want to pass a variable with this, or pass a parameter here. And that variable, or that parameter, is going to be called amount, or AMT. That's going to be what our total score is. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to use the one that passes a parameter, and that is going to be the second one that has the little blank space with the N in it. So I'm going to drag that down there, drop it in there. I'm going to call it update score by. So update score by, I'm using my camel case with my uppercase S and uppercase B. And then the parameter I'm passing is going to be called AMT, and that's going to be the amount. And now what it's telling me to do is to drop in a if statement in a console log. So it says something like this. So I'm going to do exactly like that, and I'm going to go find my control statements. I need an if else, it looks like, because I got an if else right there. So I need an if else statement. I'm going to drop that in there, and then I'm going, right now it says if the current player is 1, so I'm going to need an equals, equality operator. I'm going to drag that in there. So if current player, so I type in current player is equal to 1, so that means if it's player 1's turn, then P1 score is going to be equal to P1 score plus amount. So that means I need a variable, the assign a variable, not to create a new one. So I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to make P1 score equal to, and I need a plus sign because I'm going to be adding 1 every time. So plus sign, and P1 score will be equal to P1 score plus amount. So P1 score, oops, it's not letting me click in there. Something is going funky here. Hold on. I'm gonna, sometimes if you get to this, if you get to a point and it's doing something weird like that, it's not letting me click in here, I'm gonna just reload this, because sometimes what happens is the JavaScript that's running this page gets corrupted and doesn't work the way you want it to. So now, okay, now I can click in there, so that's good. So I'm going to go back to, where was I? Up here. I was right there. So P1 score is equal to P1 score plus amount. P1 score plus AMT. And AMT is whatever number gets sent to update score by. So later on, I think the way that we'll do this is it's going to give you positive scores if you pick the right one, and negative scores if you pick the wrong one. So it'll pass, whatever that number is, positive or negative, will go into here. And if P1 is the one who has it, then it's going to either add or subtract to P1 score. So then the next thing, if it's not P1 score, it must be P2 score, because there are only 2 players. So I'm going to take that down here, and then I want to take another math block. I'm using the addition operator, and I'm going to say P2 score is equal to AMT, and AMT again is that parameter that gets passed into this function right here, into the update score by. So then it says, the next thing I want to do outside of the if statement, outside of the if else statement, I want to put 2 console logs in there, and those are under variables again. And this is where I'm just going to put what the score is, just so I can keep track of it in the console log as I'm building this thing. And I'm going to be showing some text plus a variable, so I'm going to use the addition operator. And then what it says is P1 score is going to be that, and P1 score is going to be P1 score the variable. So in this case I'm just saying it as a string. In this case I'm calling it a variable. And on here I'm going to say P2 score. Oops, let me separate that a little bit just so I can tell the difference between the two. And I'm putting a space in there because remember, strings preserve the spaces. And now I'm going to say this is going to be P2 score. So it should happen when I test this. Once I add these calls, it'll print out in my console log and tell me what the score is. So now it says I need to go down to update score by and update score by to the appropriate if-else statements in the check correct function. So I'm going to go up here to the check correct function, and I'm going to put calls in for this update score by. So the check correct was up here somewhere. There it is, right there. The check correct, and at this one here, what it's doing is it's I'm saying you got it right. Well, now I'm going to give you points for getting it right. So if I go to right there, yes, this one right here, if you get it right, you're going to get +1 score, and if I get it wrong, I'm getting -3 score. So I go to my functions, and the one I want is the one that's going to pass a parameter, and that's the one with the blank with the n right there. So I'm going to take that one. I'm going to put it right. I'm going to put it. I guess it doesn't matter where I put it, but I'm going to put it above the console log, just so because later on, I mean, what you might do is delete those console logs out later, but I'm just going to leave them in. So what I want to do is the function I'm calling is that update score by. So I'm going to type update score by, and then I'm updating it by 1 if they get it right. So if button ID is equal to random button ID, that means they got it right. I'm going to give you 1 point for that. Now on the if it's not right, so if it doesn't equal that, so it must be wrong, then I'm going to update score by, so calling that same function, and this time I'm going to do, this is -3. I think that's kind of severe, that if you get it wrong they take 3 points away. And I realize right now the game is easy, but there's actually a way later on, if we have time, I'll show you how to make this harder. And I've played it, the hard version of it, and I can't get to 10 points because by the time you get to the end it gets so hard to tell the difference between the colors. But so now what I've done here is I've put calls to this function. So if they get it right, it calls the update score by function and passes 1 as the parameter. If they get it wrong, it passes -3, which means it goes all the way down here. It goes to that update score, and it changes the score by whatever amount is passed. So either by 1 or by -3. And it's keeping track of whose score it is with that whole with the current player thing. So if it's saying, because when we did switch player here, we have that current player variable. It's saying that if it's player 1, then we're going to add the score to P1 score. If it's player 2, we're going to add the score to P2's score. So that's kind of how it's keeping track of it, which I know it kind of seems weird how that works, but it'll work with the exception of that. Oh, there's a mistake right there. Look at that. So what I should have put in here instead of the X, I forgot to type in P2 score. So if I didn't catch that, this would not work. But because if up here I updated P1 score, here I'm updating P2 score. So just take a quick look at it, make sure I have no more errors, and then I'm going to click run. Actually, let me make the console log a little bigger here so you can see it. Now we should start to see here the score keep being kept here. So we hit run. Okay, so it says correct button is 3, so that's that one. And remember, like if you're actually playing this game, you don't see this debug console. So this is telling me that it's the correct button, but that's only so I can look at it and say okay and make sure that it's working. But if the actual player is playing it, they don't see the console log. So I'm going to click that one. And so now what it did is it says that P1 score is 1, P2 score is 0, said I got it right. And now it's telling me on this one here, the correct button is 3, so it should be this one. And it's telling me it's player 2's turn. So now let me click it again. So I got 2 right in a row. And you can see right here, the P1 score is now 1 and the P2 score is 1. So it's keeping track of the score correctly. Now let's see if I get one. If I get it wrong, what happens? So these are the wrong buttons. So I click on one of the wrong ones. And now you can look and see what happened is it says wrong. The P1 score is now -2 and the P2 score is still 1. And you can see my thing is still toggling back and forth. So as I click, it's changing players. I go back and forth. Let me do this a few times. Whoa, that one's hard to see. Okay, there we go. I think that's it. Yep. Okay. So now when you look down here, you can see that after I press the last one, the P2 score is up to 4, and P1 has got their score back up to 1 from -2 or whatever it was before. So it looks like that's working. So that's a good thing because we only have a few more of these left. So updating the score next. So let's go ahead and click finish and continue. And now we're on to 21. And 21, when it loads, is going to update the UI to show the score. Okay, yeah, that's right. So now we know in the debug console that it's telling us what the score is. Now we need to make sure that it shows up here. So this is a user interface piece, and it's called it's called score one label. The ID is score one underscore label. This one is score two underscore label. So what I need to do is I need to update those every time we go through the through that process. We need to make sure those get changed to the score variables. So let's see how we're going to do this. It says this is pretty easy. That's good. So there are the text labels called score label, score one label, and score two label, which I just showed you right there. It's those numbers. And then it says we want to add set text statements at the end of the function. And it says we can either replace the console log statements that we used, or we can just add after them. It doesn't really matter. So it says at the end of the function, and it didn't tell us what function. So let's look at the ones that we just did that tell us the score. Where do those go? I think those are, okay, so those are down here in the update score by. So we're going to put those in the one we just added, the update score by amount. And right now there are console log statements in there. And it says we can leave those in there or we can take them out. It doesn't matter. I'll just leave them in there. And then I'm going to take set text, which is under UI controls. It's this one right here, set text. And I'm going to go ahead and just put it above it. It doesn't matter either way. I'm going to put two of those set text because I'm changing both labels, right? So it says set text at the end of label player one. Yep, and I want to do two. So I'm going to set text, and it says I want to do score one label is what that's called, and you can see right there if we mouse over it, it says the same thing. So I'm going to find that ID right here, and it's in alphabetical order, score one label. And now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to grab score two label, and then I'm setting it to the text, and the text is just going to be P1 score for player 1 and P2 score for player 2. So remember, it can't be in quotes, because if it's in quotes it's a string, so I got to get rid of those quotes. And I'm just going to type P1 score, and down here I'm going to type get rid of the quotes again because we don't need those, and type P2 score. So what it will do is after every time this function is called, it's going to update both of those, and it's going to change the score one label to whatever is in the P1 score variable, and it's going to change the score two label to whatever's in that variable. And then it says test it out. And after adding test it out, so let's go ahead and click run, and let's click a couple times, and there we got some numbers. So now it's player 2's turn, it's player 1's turn. Okay, so now you can see it looks to be working, and I'm picking the color that looks slightly different than the others, and it seems to be working. Let's see if I get one wrong. Oh, it subtracted, it went down to 1. So let's let player 2 get one wrong too. Oh, and now we're back to 1. So this is working beautifully. Exactly. Oop, you see I just lost 3 points. Oh, he just lost 3 points. Okay, so that's working perfectly. So we only have 22 left and then 23. And I'm not going to get into all these at the end, so just doing these last couple. And now the next one is we're going to go ahead and click finish. So we're pretty much done with one minor exception. And that is, how does the game end? So here it takes us back to Alexis and Michael having their conversation, and they're saying, well, how do we end this? And if you read through here, you can see, I think they give you a couple different ideas. So they say, well, the first to get to 10 points wins. Well, how about the first to get 3 wrong loses? Play until the difference of the score is greater than 5. Play until the combined score is 10. Play until combined they get 3 wrong. So there are lots of different ways that we could end this game. And what they want you to do in here is to do any one of those. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. But what they're going to do is they're going to tell you where they think it should be. And they're saying that, yeah, we should put it in that, we should make a new function called check game over. We should put that in the checked correct, and then we could see how that works. So let's go on to the next one, and we'll actually do it. And what I'm going to show you, the easiest one is probably when the score gets to 10. So whoever gets to 10 first. And so what we're going to do is, let me see, make sure, read what this says here. It says add some code completely on your own. So they're not going to tell you how to do that. They just want to, this wants you to do it. And let's see, should we do that or not? Does it really matter? Maybe we'll go through one option, I guess, because there are a bunch of different ways that we can do this. And basically, they kind of all start out with a function. And I'm going to drag a new function over here. It's not going to pass any parameters. So I'm going to call this function check game over. And remember, you can do whatever you want in here. It doesn't have to be what I do, but this is just one example. And what I want to put in here is an if statement, because I'm going to check to see if the game is over. And let's see, we'll put just a regular old if. And we're going to say that if, we'll do the or, because we're going to look at both player 1 and player 2. So what we're going to say is that if player 1's score is greater than 10, or player 2's score is greater than 10, then we're going to say game over. So that's probably the easiest way to do that. So the way we would do that is we need some greater than or equal to's. Let's see, right here, greater than or equal to, and then greater than or equal to. So we need 2 of those, and we're putting them on either side of the or. And then the first thing we're going to compare is P1 score. So if P1 score is greater than 10, or P2 score is greater than 10, then we want to we can do it different ways. Like I think in the past what we've done is they have a game over screen here. So there's already a game over screen in here. So if I go to that, it says game over. Or actually, you know what? I don't know if they have this in there or if I put that in there before. So if you don't have this, what you may want to do is add a screen, and you'll have to do that in design mode. And you go here and you say new screen, but I'm not sure if I made that one or if that was one they had on there before. But it's probably in there. It was probably theirs because I reset this, so it probably reset the design too. So the game over screen, it's got this thing here, and it's got these 2 things here: player 1 wins or player 2 wins. So we'll have to figure out that too. We'll put another if statement in here to see who wins. But if that whoever wins, what we're going to do is we're going to set the screen to game over screen. So we go back to UI controls, and we've done this several times. And this is set screen is what I'm looking for here. There it is, set screen. So if the either person gets a score above 10, we're setting the screen to the game over screen. Now, the next thing we want to do is right after we set the screen, we want to determine who won, player 1 or player 2. So we're going to need another if block. And this one's going to need to be an if else. So because we'll have two options that can happen. Either player 1 does it or player 2 does it. And then we're going to go up here. We're going to put that right below set screen. So this is like a nested statement. It's an if else inside of an if. And what we want to do is we want to say if we'll say player 1 right here. We'll say if player 1 score, so if the P1 score is the variable, is greater than P2's score, then we're going to have to show one of these and hide the other, or they may actually both be hidden because they have this kind of grayish color. So let me go back into the design mode, and if I click on that, okay, yeah, it says it starts out hidden, and then this one also starts out hidden. So they both start out hidden by default. So we don't have to hide one and show the other. We can just show one of them. So I'll go back into my code here, and then here for my UI controls, I'm going to go back to the show element. So I'll go to show element, and where did that go? Oh, there it is. Show element. So I'll need two of those because I'm going to show one or the other. Now, if P1 score is greater than P2 score, that must mean P1 wins. So I'm going to put this to player 1 wins is the name of that thing. I'm going to show player 1 win label. And now if player 2 score is greater, then it's going to go to the else, which means I will show player 2's score label or win label. So that goes there. So that looks like that should work. Oh no, the next thing I need to do is I need to call these functions in the in check correct. So I'm going to go up to check correct, and check correct is right there. And for the calling that function, I'm going to grab one of these. I'm not passing any parameters to it, so I'm just going to use the one without the n in it, this one right here. I'm going to drag that up into here. I'm going to put it right there because I want it to check. The first thing I want it to do is check to see if anybody won. So before I go setting the board and switching the player. So I'm going to do that first, and that was called check game over. Check game over. So now, when we're checking correct, which this one does most of the work, this one tells whether or not the button is correct or not. Then it goes through three things. First, it's going to go to the check game over function, and it's going to see if the game is over or not. Then it's going to set the board back to the way to the beginning, or with all the different colors, or reset the board. And then we're going to switch players from 1 to 2 or 2 to 1. So now let's take a look at this, see how it works. We click on run, and now I'm going to try to get all of them right so I can get somebody to 10. Ooh, wait, did something just happen weird there? Hold on. Maybe it didn't. Okay, it didn't. I was thinking that player 2 got a score, but they didn't. So now player 2, there we go. And there we go. And there we go. And there we go. Oh, that one's a little harder to do. There it is. So 4, 3. Now you can see probably now one of the disadvantages to this particular score method is that if player 1 and 2 are tied and they get to the point at the end where we are right now. So right now it's 9 to 9. Nobody has gotten one wrong yet, but watch when I click here, what should happen is it should go straight to the game over screen. Yeah. So it goes to the game over screen. So if you use this particular way, player 1 has that advantage. And there's a way to fix that. And what I may do, since right now we are at, we're sitting at about, 44 minutes. That's longer than I wanted to go. But I may do another video that kind of shows you how you can put some things in there if you wanted to, like fixing that little error, like making this this number, where is it, right here, the random number, the plus 20, making this get more difficult as we go along. So, but that's basically all that you have to do for this one. So if I reset, you can go back, and that's the color sleuth game, and that it's pretty fun to sit here and play. It's some of them are kind of obvious with the color differences, but if we were to get in here and mess around with the difficulty, we could reduce this number. If you reduce that number to say like 10 or something like that, then it would make it a lot harder to pick them. And actually, why don't we do that? Let's try that out. Let's just go ahead and drop a 10 in here on all of these and see how different they are. Oops, yeah, there we go. And then let's reset it. Okay, so now you can see they're all much closer together now in color. I'm not really, or wait, no, wait, there we go. Okay, so now you can see they're all much closer than they were before. I still think I can tell a difference. It looks like I've been right so far. But we could mess around with that number and also turn that into a variable if we wanted to. So, but that's all I got for this one. For the rest of this, if you look at, there's some more text here in this last part, and this is just, I believe, Alexis and Michael talking again. Oh no, sorry, this is, yeah, it talks about that. Talks about collaboration and all that. That stuff's fun. These last three things, these are just AP practice responses. So if you're in my class and you're watching this, you don't have to do these three. You probably would only have to do those if you're in like AP computer science or something like that. But that's all I have, and hopefully that helped you get all of these done. And I think I'll try to do another video later on that shows you how to make the scores, or different ways to do the score, as well as make it harder as you go along. You can make it progressively harder. So, but we'll see if I have time to get that done later on. But that's all I got for today. So hope you're having fun. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope it helped you out. And I will talk to you later.